There are millions of podcasts being done all over the world that take on the personalities of their creator. Some bring in thousands of listeners each week. Some bring in large amounts of revenue, while others entertain millions and help sell products. If you're like many podcasters, you want to reach your maximum potential. But how? How do you make your podcast stand out from all the rest? Join Dr. Barrett Matthews as he talks to experts who are doing it on The Productive Podcaster. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Productive Podcaster. I am your host, Barrett Matthews, and I'm excited to get this going today. You know, The Productive Podcaster is a podcast for you, the podcaster. It is set up to help you to be more productive, more profitable, engage more. Productive is defined by just doing something and getting better. What I mean by that is this. Some of you may define being productive as having a lot of people who listen to your podcast. Some may be saying you want a lot more downloads. Some may be saying you want to sell more products. Some want to make more money off of it. Whatever your idea of productive is as a podcaster, I want to make sure that we give that to you. We're going to have different interviews and different people. Of course, sometimes I'll be discussing with you about how to be better as a podcaster, but we want to make it so that you can enjoy what you do as a podcaster. So welcome to The Productive Podcaster. We're going to start off with a segment that I like to call Pros and Cons.
Pros and Cons.
Okay, pros and cons works like this. I'm going to talk to you about something that you need to have going on in your podcast and the pitfalls that can have if you don't have it. So what we're going to do today with pros and cons is make sure that you have the best signal to work with. See, when you're dealing with your podcast, and I'm talking about your audio signal, you need to make sure that it sounds good. You have to make sure that you eliminate all the noises. You need to make sure that you have good Wi-Fi. Whatever it is, you need to make sure you have good mics. Now, we're going to go in another segment later on where we talk about the particular microphones that work best for a podcast. But I encourage you to do some research yourself to make sure that you have the microphone that you need. But I want you to make sure that you also plan for your podcast. Do some pre-show prep to make sure that your audio sounds good. You don't want to send it out there and you didn't even check to make sure it was working right. That's never good. You want to make sure that your guest, if you have guests on, that they can be heard clearly and that you can hear them and they can hear you, because the microphone is going to pick up the little things and it's going to pick up the things that you don't want to be heard by people. And you want to say, I'd say if you have a guest in studio with you, at least make sure that you're 6 inches away at the most, at the least rather. Make sure that you're 6 inches away so that you're not making that muffled sound. You know the sound I'm talking about? Yeah, you don't want that. Make sure your gain is up on high when you're dealing with your microphone. Make sure that your audio is up on high. You don't want the popping sounds. You don't want the clipping. You want to make sure that you're not flashing red every time so that it's just going over. It has to be clear. It has to be concise. And your signal needs to come across so that when the audience hears it, they're relaxed when they're hearing it. They're not going, oh, wow, what is that? Get that out the way early. Prep for it. Make sure that you're ready so that you can have what we call a productive podcast. And that, my friends, is pros and cons. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to get a message from our sponsor. I want you to stay tuned. Listen to that message, because there may be something you can gain out of it. And we'll be right back with our special guest on The Productive Podcaster.
You've heard the rumblings. You even thought about starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all of the hard work for you so that you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Productive Podcaster. Once again, I'm Barrett Matthews, and I have something special for you now. I went to a conference a while ago, and it was called Podcast Movement, and I met some incredible people in the world of podcasting. They have podcasts that are bringing in lots and lots of people. Some people, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars doing podcasting. Yes, believe it or not, they are. Then there are some people who are helping those podcasters to be their most productive selves. And one of those people is with us now. I have Mr. Daniel Raynaud here me of Jiveworld. Daniel, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to see you again.
Great to see you too, man. It's good to have you here. It's good to know that everyone's being safe. We've had a lot of things going on in the world, but it's good to have you here with us today. I want you to take a second, if you would, and just talk about Jiveworld. What is Jiveworld?
Great. So Jiveworld is a mobile app for language learners, advanced and intermediate level language learners who want to get fluent in another language. So Jiveworld is a company I created. We partner with podcast and radio producers and companies. And we have a product out there in the market called Looper, which is for Spanish. And so if you're an intermediate or advanced Spanish learner and you want to improve your listening so you can actually understand how real people speak, have real conversations, because you can't have a conversation unless you can understand what someone's saying, then you might like our app.
Yeah, I want to get back to that in a second because I thought that was so cool what you all demonstrated at the conference. But I do want to ask you, how did the concept of Jiveworld come about? How did you think of this? What was it that prompted you to do this?
Oh, this is a very personal story for me. A few years ago, I moved from San Francisco, Silicon Valley, California area to Colombia, to Medellin, Colombia.
Wow.
I'd spent quite a few years there. I'd had a decent career, but I was ready for a change. And so for about, a year and a half, I was practicing my Spanish as I was going to and from work. I used to work at Google, at the mothership, at the Googleplex in Mountain View.
The big spot.
Yeah, I used to have like a half an hour commute, and I would listen to my Pimsleur tapes or CDs, like one lesson on the way there, one lesson on the way back, and I used to study Spanish. And then sometime in 2017, I got to Medellin in Colombia, and I found that even though people could understand what I was saying, I could say the things I wanted to say.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people I spoke to, I couldn't understand what they were saying to me. Sometimes I could. Some people speak very much like you hear on the like teacher speak, like you hear on the cassettes, and you hear like a newscaster type of pronunciation, clear pronunciation, using formal grammar, the words as they're presented to you in your exercise books. But most people just don't speak like that. They speak like you and me, and they speak with their local accents and their local slang or whatever. And so I was struggling with that. And so I was looking for solutions for myself. And I didn't find anything that really worked for me. I tried all sorts of different things, many of the things that other people try. And in the end, I decided, well, I want to build something for myself and like attack this particular problem. Just being able to understand people, like speaking naturally, variety of accents, using language how it's most natural to them, which is different from how things are presented in the books. So that was really the origin story for this.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, that's brilliant. You must have had some challenges with that. What kind of challenges did you have in getting that up and running?
Oh boy. Well, software is hard. I have been doing this for 20 years. I'm working with a team, and we've probably got a century of experience between us. But if you're solving an original problem, if you're solving something, bringing something to market that doesn't already exist, it's going to be different from anything out there. So you can't just copy what's already out there. If you're doing another like email client, for example, you've got lots of examples of what an email program looks like. Right. And then you can, you got your inbox, you got your respond to, you've got all your different features and settings. But when you have a new problem, you're kind of flying blind a bit. You have to figure things out. And so there's a lot of research and development, some hard thinking, building, designing, rebuilding, redesigning. So it took us about two years or so of hard work before we could actually get a product out into the market that was designed the way we wanted and that was built, that was ready for release. So plenty of problems there. But, that's what we do. That's what you do, right?
Now, the thing is that I love is, and I want everyone who's paying attention to this to listen to this, because he saw a problem. He realized that the best solution was something that he could create. And he knew that in order to do that, he was going to run into obstacles. But he had to make sure he was productive, there's that word again, in making sure that it happened. Now, one of the things that we hadn't talked about yet is that you have a wife, and you had to uproot your wife and go to Colombia.
Oh, yes. Tell me about it.
How was that?
Yeah. So, it was definitely kind of me driving this. So throughout my life, I've done a lot of traveling. This is not my first trial living in another country. Okay. I spent a few years living in Japan. I kind of spent some years in Europe, in France, in Australia, traveling there. And so I'm kind of used to moving around. My wife less so. So after like 17 years in San Francisco, I mean, I love the place, but I was ready for a change. But we went over there together, and we just figured it out. I love that. I love that experience, being in a new place with new people, a different culture. So that was pretty exciting. But again, not without challenges.
Not without challenges. I got it. So let's talk about Jiveworld now. With Jiveworld, because what I thought was so cool is that you can actually learn learn the language pretty much as someone is doing their podcast. And I love that, because I was just like watching, I was kind of enthralled by it, because you were showcasing with Lupa while you were at the conference. And I want you just to, if you could, break it down as to how it works.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're doing with Jiveworld and Lupa that hasn't really been done well before is that we're using what I call native content. So this is not sort of made for study content. Instead, the problem with using made for study content is it's never like the real thing.
Exactly.
Okay. This is like a kind of a vinyl surface with a wood finish. It's just not the same as wood. It's not
good analogy.
So we wanted to start with the difficult stuff, the stuff that you're listening to, that native speakers are listening to. It's natural for them. That's where you're hearing the natural voices and the natural use of language. And so we sought out basically what was the best radio content. And we discovered this fantastic podcast called Radio Ambulante, which is essentially kind of like, if you're familiar with This American Life, which every podcaster should be, it's basically a Latin American version of that. So all the stories are about Latin America. They're all in Spanish. They're all done through narratives, folding in interviews with real people who live these stories. So you're hearing voices from Argentina, from Colombia, from Cuba, from Miami, Puerto Rico, like all over, which is perfect for us. Talking about all sorts of different things and all different levels of society. So you can be listening to sort of like policemen or politicians or journalists or single mothers, or it's sort of anyone from any walk of life. And so you're really hearing the sort of like full range, the richness of the language, talking about all sorts of different things. And so we approached them, shared this idea. We had a really kind of bad version of what we wanted to build. You know, we hadn't fully designed it, but they could see the opportunity and the vision of this thing, and trusted us to produce what is the final app. So that was really the key to unlocking it, was finding a partner, a content partner with just like fantastic content, which is really what the learner needs to be listening to in order to get their listening up to a native level, like a native fluency.
So what made it so that, why did you want to partner with other podcasts and podcast entities instead of just doing everything on your own?
Because podcasting is hard.
Tell me about
it. What we do is hard enough for us. We're a small company. So we've got at the moment like 9 of us working full time, and we're self-funded. And those 9 people, they have to take care of not just sort of the engineering and the design, so a lot of the editorial stuff, the marketing, distribution, the sales, all sorts of things. So the way we like to operate is through partnerships, and I'm a podcast head myself. I mean, I listen to way too many hours of podcasts through the week. I mean, dozens and dozens of hours. I absolutely love it. So, like, the opportunity to work and help sustain the podcasting world by giving them a new revenue source. This is a great revenue source, by the way, for podcasting, because it doesn't interfere with any of their other revenue, because the audience for this is by definition different from their current audience. This is an audience that wouldn't normally be able to listen to their content. So we're finding an audience internationally, let's say, who aren't familiar with this great content, whose the value they get out of it is huge, because we charge on a subscription basis.
Yes.
And so this is, you don't need to put ads in order to get revenue. You don't need to apply for grants. You don't need to do pledge drives. The subscription is a significant piece of revenue in itself.
Yes.
And you can just present the content as you want it, as it is. So you're using stuff which is already in your catalog. Now, we didn't want to like recreate the wheel from scratch. So we would much rather work with sort of like talented producers, podcasters, storytellers.
Makes sense.
And like it's just great for everyone. We just wouldn't be able to do that like anywhere near as good as Radio Ambulante or yourself or other people who are in this world.
Well, thank you for that. Now, I want to ask you now, I know with Radio Ambulante and with Lupa, you're dealing with the Latin American community and Spanish. Are there any other languages that you're working with?
So we're working on a product for English as a second language, known as ESL in the trade. So because I used to live in Japan, I have a network there of some really talented people, linguists, marketing people, and so they're engaged at the moment in translating some podcast stories, some radio stories, so that we can do a product for Japanese people who want to learn English. Similar for Latin America, we have a lot of people on our staff who bilingual Spanish-English who've been preparing the Spanish content for the native English-speaking audience who are learning Spanish, but we can do the same in reverse. So those are kind of our first two markets for the ESL product. And then ultimately, I mean, our remit is to do all languages and from any language to any other language. So eventually we'll get there, but yes, our next stop is working with English content, English language content.
So you're going to help the whole world to be more productive with their podcast because they can reach people in different languages all over the world.
Well, I mean, it's just a win for everyone because, I mean, if you think about it, in most countries, the most important skill you want, I mean, this is not just for your business or for your work, but also socially, is competency in English. Not just competency, but fluency in English. So you can imagine being in South America, the economic opportunities that open up if you can speak fluent English. Same in whatever country you choose. And so this is a really valuable thing that we're offering to that audience. Plus, also, we're giving the opportunity to get, I mean, honestly, the English-speaking world is so far ahead of the rest of the world in terms of the diversity and quality, just the art of storytelling, of exploring ideas, exploring music, through podcasts. I mean, that world is just so much bigger, and to make that accessible to, you know, another 6 billion people in the world is just an amazing thing. So we're very excited about this one in particular.
Well, everybody, hey, look, you guys can check out what Daniel is doing with Jiveworld. Go to jiveworld.com. Jiveworld.com. That's JIVEWORLD.com. And you can check out what they're doing with Lupa app, the Lupa app. Now that's LUNA. I'm sorry, LUPA. I'm sorry, not Luna. Lupa. LUPA.app. APP. LUPA.app. Make sure you check them out as well. You will love it. I promise you that. Daniel, I thank you for joining me on the Productive Podcast for today, my man.
Thanks, Barrett. Great to see you, and best of luck there. Stay safe in these very unusual times.
I will definitely do that. Thank you so much. Do you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all the hard work for you so you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or just go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
You've heard the rumblings. You've even thought of starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
Okay, we're back, guys. Man, was that great or what? What a great interview. I love him. He's a fantastic guest, and I want to welcome Daniel back anytime he wants. That was Daniel Raynaud. I want to thank you guys for welcoming him, and I thank him for bringing us his gift. So look forward to working with him in the future. So what we have now is a segment we like to call PodQuest.
PodQuest.
PodQuest is this. You get to ask a question about podcasting. Now, normally we would like to do it to where you get to ask one of our guests from the previous week a question, but since this is the first one, you get to ask me. Now, I'm going to talk about a question I get asked all the time. And that question is, Barrett, do I have to get a lot of equipment in order to do a podcast? And my answer is simply, maybe. Well, and I say that because it depends on what you're looking to do with your podcast. Now, I always say if you're starting out, no, don't get a lot of equipment for your podcast. I don't want you going broke just to start your podcast. Work your way up. You can start off with a little bit of equipment. You can start off, I've known some people, I don't recommend it, but I've known people to use just their computer audio to do their podcast, and it seemed to work fine for them for a while, and then they upgraded and they saw the difference when they got a professional microphone. You can do the same thing. I don't want you going broke doing a podcast, but you want to have a plan to upgrade. You want to upgrade to having professional microphones. You want to upgrade to having a switcher so that you can actually blend in your music and blend in your audio to make it sound the way you want it to. You want to make sure that your recordings are doing very well and that people can actually hear it clearly when they listen to it. You want to eliminate any outside sounds when you do it. You want to make sure that your equipment is good. If you're doing a video podcast, make sure you have lighting, make sure your cameras work. All of these things come into play when you're doing a podcast. So you want to get those things in order. Now, does it have to cost you a lot of money? No, it doesn't. I encourage you to shop around. I encourage you to look at different sites where the equipment may work best. I encourage you to research. Google. Talk to other podcasters. Find out what they're doing. Find out what they use. You'd be surprised at all the stuff that's available to you if you just do some research. So do you have to spend a lot of money to get a whole lot of equipment? No, not right now. Not when you're just starting off. But as you grow, you should. I definitely suggest upgrading, and I think that will help your podcast to do better and better and better. So now we're going to do what I call our podcast profile. This is where we showcase one of the podcasters that are out there that are doing it, and we want to just say, hey guys, we see you and notice you out there. So the person that I want to showcase today is Oz Cooper. He has a podcast called The Culture Warrior. The Culture Warrior. Now you're saying, well, wow, what is that about? Well, Oz Cooper studies African and African-American history, and he wants to make sure that people understand the cultural impact that African culture has had, not just in the United States, but in the world. And he does that in The Culture Warrior. He talks about current events and how they've been affected with the African-American people and the African culture itself, the diaspora and so forth. It's a great podcast. I recommend that you guys take a listen to The Culture Warrior with Oz Cooper. I believe he puts it on Saturdays at 2:00 Eastern. But of course, it's a podcast, so you can listen to it anytime you want. Oz Cooper, thank you for being our profile on The Productive Podcaster. And we want to thank you so much for The Culture Warrior. So guys, come down to one of my favorite parts of the show here. And that is where we actually do a giveaway. That's right. On The Productive Podcaster, we do a giveaway each week. Now, I have to say that this week, since we don't have a lot of people because we haven't started the subscription yet, so we don't have a giveaway. But I'm going to do this. Since I did mention in our last segment, Mr. Oz Cooper and his podcast, The Culture Warrior, I'm going to give away an item to him. That's right. Oz is going to get it. I'm going to show you what it is. You're going to get this recording in progress, Oz, so the people can leave you alone when you're doing your podcast. So I want to thank you, Oz, for being a part of the Productive Podcaster today. We may have to have you on as a guest sometime, but I want to thank you for doing that. And then, guys, if you subscribe, if you follow our Facebook page, The Productive Podcaster, you, too, can be a part of our giveaway. We're going to give away something each week. It may be that. It may be a checklist to help you with your podcast. It may be a book. It may be anything. It could be anything. A ticket to an event. It could be a lot of different things just by you subscribing and being a part of the tribe of the Productive Podcaster. So I want to thank you guys for doing that. Now, as I wrap up this episode, the very first episode of the Productive Podcaster, I like to do it with a productive quote because we want you to be productive, so we wanted to give you a productivity type of quote. So that quote comes from the martial arts legend. That's right. You know who I'm going to say, Bruce Lee. That's right. Bruce Lee had a quote that says, if a man thinks too long on a thing, he'll never get it done. Let me say that to you again. If a man thinks too long on a thing, he'll never get it done. That's by the great Bruce Lee. Now, what does that say to you? Well, here's what it says to me. Because I work with a lot of podcasters. I help produce podcasts for people. But I know a lot of people that come to me and say, Barrett, I've been thinking about doing a podcast for a couple of years now. Everybody's telling me to do a podcast, Barrett. You know, I want to do a podcast. So many people keep saying they should do a podcast. Then do it. Because as Bruce Lee said, if a man thinks too long on a thing, he'll never get it done. Stop thinking about it and just do it. Is it going to be perfect when you start off? Nope. It won't be perfect when you start off, but at least it'll be done. So I recommend to you guys to get started on your podcast, get it going right now. And I look forward to seeing you when we do the next Productive Podcaster. See you guys later. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining us on the Productive Podcaster. Be sure to join us next time for another great show. We welcome your engagement, so make sure you participate by joining the Productive Podcaster Facebook group and chime in. Also, share the Productive Podcaster with some of your friends right now. If you have a podcast and you're looking for guests, or if you would like to be a guest on a podcast, join our podcast exchange at www.podcastworlddirectory.com. We'll see you next time.